We're the Vinyl Verdict. I'm Jacob.
I'm Michael.
And today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to do a full album review of No Dice by Badfinger. Do some upfront kind of context, and then I think we'll go by track and talk about our impressions. It was really, I guess, the second album with the Badfinger name on it, but the first one with the classic lineup of Pete Ham, Tom Evans, Joey Mullen, and Mike Gibbons. Release on Apple Records. Some of it was produced by Mal Evans, so we'll get into some of those tracks. And then overall was produced by Jeff Emmerich as well after Mal left. It's 40 minutes long total. A little bit short, I think, for a 1970 album. A lot of bonus tracks that were available at this time. Unlike some of their later albums, there wasn't like a version of this album that was rejected by Apple. So I'm not sure how they decided on this final track listing and why maybe some of these bonus tracks, which sound like studio demos, weren't included. It is pretty Pete Ham dominant also. 6, debatably 7 of the songs are Pete Ham songs. So he has over half of the writing credit on the album, which is the most of any Badfinger album. But then obviously Joey and Tommy contribute a couple tracks, and Mike has one as well. So it does have representation from every member. It hit number 28 on the US chart, which is actually lower than I thought. But obviously this is it's not a debut album, but kind of the first one that is not a soundtrack or, basically the first big US release.
In a way, it's the birth of Badfinger. The reviews, not to go off on that, but were pretty excellent for the rock nature of the album and the sound that it had. And
it is highly represented in their live set. 10 or 11 of these songs was played live at least once. And by the time you saw them with Straight Up and everything, I think they were still playing half of the songs, a huge part of their sound.
Yes.
So yeah, it kicks off with I Can't Take It. Typical in Badfinger, Pete Ham usually got the lead off track. Very classic rock, but kind of slowed down.
I Can't Take It, great beginning to the album, and a rock song that's a little more unique to me because of the chord changes. The lead, which Joey played in the middle and on the fade out, was superb, and I remember watching it and being knocked out by it, and loved the song, loved Tom's harmony in it. They then layered on the saxophones and everything. But
maybe a lot of it is the production, I think, makes it kind of harsh. Tom's harmonies are pretty shrill almost, and a lot of the guitar work, I like it, but it's very, like the amount of fuzz on it is a little bit too intense, and the vocals are not as clear as I'd like them to be. I think it would make it a little more soulful if they were a little more front and center. So I always found that inaccessible because of that. But then once it gets into the chorus, I think there's a nice groove. And I remember you always saying it's very like Beatlesque, kind of the woohoo.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the brass is truly just a cacophony of noise. It's like, you can't even tell. There's like one riff where it kind of does a descending thing, but other than that, it's just like a wall of brass that gets layered on halfway
It's an
through.
explosive beginning to the album, really, although it's slow. It is slow for a rock song, as you say.
We get into I Don't Mind, which captures a big part of that early Badfinger atmosphere, which is a Joey and Tommy song, and great dynamics on this. How soft it is, and then how hard it gets in the chorus. And
I think one verse is through a Wesley speaker or something, or a fader or whatever they did to give it that.
There's some chorus effect on the vocals that, it's really nice for their harmonies.
It's quiet after I Can't Take It finishes, and you hear that beautiful, I believe it was around the D chord or whatever it is, the beginning, and not the Pete Ham genius, which we're all familiar with, but the Joey Tommy kind of axis when they sang together, which really we loved, which isn't talked about too much today. A little bluesy in the middle there, a little rocky thrown in for a minute.
The piano and guitar riff, they're very similar. They almost go like in and out of phase with each other, even though I think they're separated in the pan. Great descending bass line also in that part that stands out.
Yes.
And then lyrically, I think it's pretty strong. It's got that I'm only sleeping kind of like provocation of like, you woke me up and now I'm kind of upset about it after being judged or something like that, which is also a good style. And then the endings to these songs also, as I was listening to them, like, these are weird endings. Every single song on the first side here, it just ends on like some weird live chord every time. And this one also, it's kind of fading out the same way it came in, but instead of letting it fully fade, it does that weird last chord again. Clearly, that shows that they're a live band. It's not the way in the studio, I think.
They were a live band, all right.
So it's a sandwich. Started with the rock song, kind of more of a ballady, rock ballad, into another rock song, Love Me Do. Joey's real debut in the band. This is a full Joey song. Symmetry to I Can't Take It. It's got peppered lead guitar work all around it. Great drum fills. That bass drum in those drums is just produced so well. I love the sound of the bass drum on this song. But the guitar work, this is basically as dirty as Pete Ham can play, which is still beautiful. He like falls into melodies. Sounds like he's like trying to play these dirtier riffs, but he can't avoid getting something melodic each time.
Love Me Do, at least that's how I thought as a young guy watching them play it, was the height of cool. Of course, everything goes back to the 50s chords and the basic conception of rock, the chassis of the car, so to speak. But this was cooking. This was live. Place was on its feet. Badfinger ruled the world in that moment for us, and a little gutsy to name it "Love Me Do," but that's something else. That was a gutsy move, but it has a rawness to it. Beautiful lead guitar intertwined, heavy, and also always coming back to the little melody within it for sure. Not repeating the same enhancement twice. Everything is different as he goes through, and Joey's doing the song, and it's just great lead throughout, and a great rocker. Always loved it, and it was a big number for them to play. Usually, I believe in the encore. At least that's how I saw it.
And then again, another unsatisfying kind of live ending that just goes down to that.
Oh yeah, it does have that chord.
Off chord. The mood shifts on this album. I mean, it's so dynamic. Then you go back to Midnight Caller.
You had your head rocked practically off by Joey, and then comes touching, lonely lyrics by a creative songwriter of the highest order. In a way, it didn't break through like a huge hit to you. The piano was beautiful, it was Beatlesque, the song was complete. It seemed like it had just always been there.
It has more strings to some of the Ivy songwriting, and certainly if you've heard the home demo, you can understand where this came from. And I do miss some of those verse harmonies, although the chorus harmonies here are nice. Right. Again, another haunting ending with the final chord. Even on this one,
whatever that chord
is, like a signature. We get a little bit of a Pete Ham barrage here in the middle. Midnight Caller to No Matter What to Without You, heavily Pete. Flip it over to B-side Blodwyn. So debatably 4 Pete Ham songs in a row in the sequencing. And then No Matter What, not much we can say that hasn't been said, but I do find it interesting that I think this was known to be the lead single. I think it was released before the album. Interesting to bury it away here is track 5 on the album. I'm not sure about the logic there, but it definitely jumps out as a single as soon as you hear it.
I'm always amazed that it wasn't a bigger hit than it was, actually. I guess I would say it's real representative of the band, because when in recent years you heard the demo, which was unknown at the time, and then hear the recording by Badfinger, which is the first song I think Joey is on, and wow, turning a great demo into an unbelievable record to me. But
this is, I guess, my hot take for the video. As we get into Without You, though, that sounds like another track to me. It does not jump out, having listened to all of these in order. It's deeply emotional, and obviously there's confidence in his voice and everything. But it feels like a side A closer, and it fits in the album. It doesn't sound like some big single, and it's interesting, again, knowing that this is probably the most successful song that Badfinger was ever involved in any way. It feels very formulaic, and like it does feel like they pasted 2 songs together to me. That transition has never been that smooth to me. The Joey stabbing chords that he does kind of on the side, that's his signature, but it feels a little bit like phoning it in.
It is his signature, yeah.
The solo in the middle has this beautiful bending and daybreak kind of thing, but it feels like tossing it off like this is what the band's capable of. This is an average on the album, not necessarily like the best song they ever wrote. And the organ feels extremely dated to me. I would have said this feels very derivative of like Whiter Shade of Pale or something, which was only a couple of years prior. It's just kind of doing this long organ fade out on the end of a side one.
This is probably an example of a partial generational difference between us. Nilsson was number 1 with the cover of it, and I didn't even, when I came to learn right around the same time, Day After Day's on the charts, and Without You is number 1. And I came to learn, about Badfinger's version, and I did not like, the only guy that I think didn't ever like the song hearing Nilsson do it. Corny, melodramatic. When I heard Badfinger's version, and it's grown on me in these years tremendously. And what you were talking about, which was the not produced to the nth degree and kind of a little rock, unit bluesy rock recording they did of it, I like it way more than the Nilsson thing. As a Badfinger song, it never made a deep mark, which is amazing when you think that, as you say, it's probably the most successful covered song. I think it's an evergreen standard, as they call it. So that has to be considered the most successful song ever written that they did, which is a thinker for Badfinger fans.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think there's other ballads on here that are just as strong. It's a good ending to the side, though. And it's, again, kind of good contrast to No Matter What. I do love that they trade the vocals off, and I wish that was done more in the band. Obviously, there's some strong examples that I Wish You Were Here, but generally, unlike the Beatles, it was one member's song, and they would sing the verse and chorus. So it's really cool here, and I think that's why a lot of Badfinger fans love this so much, to have Pete do the verses and Tommy come in for the chorus, and that's a pretty successful collaboration, but I wish they did that more on more songs. Flip it over to the B-side. Blodwyn is the opening to the B-side? Blew my mind. I never realized that was the...
Yes.
That's such a weird... I mean, yes. I love this song. It's very sweet, and what a strange opening to a side.
This remains to me the example of... and I know it's Welsh, it's not Nashville, but it's country of some kind, country music, country western / rock, country rock, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's storytelling, which is again more of that Ivy style of songwriting, maybe of telling a story. It's a little less accessible to American audiences. It is weird to think about them playing this to stadiums or at least gyms of American students who had no idea what Blodwyn means, a spoon. I think it's the roughest his voice ever sounded. What is going on here? It's like Dark Horse, George Harrison or something. He's just like from smoking or something. His voice is totally shot, which sounds great, I think, in the context of the song.
I didn't really ever notice it.
And then the solo, I thought, yeah, there's nice lead guitar work all over. That solo's pretty extended for a Badfinger song. I think it's like 16 bars or something. He wanted to tell a story in that lead playing and really went a little bit less restrained than some of the other. I don't think there's any other.
I love the solo. I love the solo.
And then even this song gets the rock ending, where it ends on that one chord again. And then we go into real rock with Better Days. Kind of the most accessible rock song on here, other than like No Matter What or something. I think this is just really back to basics. Pretty dynamic verses, pretty heavy with lead work and harmonies and everything. And then the chorus is actually a little bit emptier. Having covered this recently, I noticed from personal experience, Pete's lead work is really hard to recreate on here. Just so much bending. It's like perfectly timed. It's just so clean the way he produced it that you can't even hear some of the individual picking. Joey offsets that really well. He does a descending part during kind of the climax of that lead part.
There's what we don't talk about too much today when people even talk about this group is the double guitar lead that they played, that if you saw them live, you were well aware of it.
Maybe noticed it, but never explicitly. The modulation and where it happens in the song is pretty interesting. That's right around the Take Away What's Mine, so kind of adds like a final act to the song. But it's not where you think. It's not the last chorus. It's like in the middle of the verse. All right, then we get into It Had to Be, which was written by Mike Gibbons, the drummer, but sung by Pete. It's interesting that Mike's still being represented as a songwriter on the album, but through Pete. Fairly simple chords, but a great melody and great lyrics, I think.
Beautiful melody, and I thought, and my friends and all of us thought at first that this was a Pete Ham Penn song, and obviously he's doing the vocal. The guitar in the middle, classic Badfinger. It was stunning. It was beautiful to me. We all loved it. It was a beautiful ballad.
I can totally see, because I know that's one of your favorite lead breaks, I think, in all of Badfinger, and I can totally see listening to that, the Beatles connection, because it's that solo is doing something. Pete doesn't always do it, but I think at his best, he's capturing the melody of the song, but then he's questioning it a little bit, backing harmony that enters right there during the solo, and that's Octopus's Garden. It's the same thing when they harmonize and you do
the solo might be the peak of the song.
Very Beatlesque. I think that's one of the most Beatlesque moments on the whole album is that break and the harmonies and everything there. So totally get it. We get something a little lighter weight into Watford John. This one, it's great. Whenever I hear it, I'm like, this is really, they're a good blues band. But then it doesn't stick. You don't ever seek this one out. It's definitely an album track. Someone came up with this riff and they're all credited, so they probably jammed on it. It really feels like more of a canvas for Pete to do some rough blues vocals and to solo around it. But it's not something where the rest of the band can shine quite as much. And the reverb, I think, might be the thing that ruins the song for me. It's just the reverb's so intense, a little grating because of that. Yeah, I love hearing, again, similar to Blodwyn, the rougher Pete Ham vocals, that he's not always singing a ballad. I think it's a great signature song for him, but fell between the cracks a little bit, and it probably was a little bit more improv than the other songs on the album. According to the Badfinger library, this was played once or twice, but it's not confirmed. This is the only one. I can imagine this could be a great live song.
Yeah, it was an anomaly. It just kind of was there, and it was a kick every time you heard it. And they were having fun, and it was fun to listen to. In the end, not really particularly, not memorable or like a major hit on the album or anything, but they threw it on there, and it showed that they could let loose a little bit. So it fit. So then the next song on the album would be Believe Me, which is, of course, Tommy steps to the floor, and it's a Tommy vocal all the way. And I really like this song and enjoy it. Again, I didn't think it was the heaviest one on the album, but of course reminiscent about Darling slightly when you first heard it with the first couple chord changes. But what has to be mentioned is the unbelievable double lead in this song. I still listen to it and have to listen to exactly how they did that. But it's very impressive in that song. Maybe a little more of that Ivy's kind of vocals still kicking around.
I agree with that. It's interesting though, already it sounds so different than the way Tom was writing in the Ivies, but maybe the vocals a little bit similar. But it's definitely a heavier ballad.
Yes, it is.
In a way that only Tom could really pull off this type of ballad, I think. And kind of the dynamics again of being very soft vocals in the verses and then getting really harsh in the chorus, like very McCartney-esque to pull that off, and getting Pete to do the harmony beneath him in there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. So and again, his only real song that's just the quintessential Tom Evans song. It's the only one that he wrote it himself without any other thing. But obviously a huge force in the band on the album overall. The solo, listening to it closer, I love the dual guitar. Obviously, that's another thing that this band could pull off. But compared to some of the other solos and live and everything like that, it actually feels like they're ignoring each other a little bit and almost like stepping on each other in this one. So I wonder if they were choreographed or like these were written, or it's really just two takes of a solo that they left both on or something and decided it sounded good. In other ones, they're kind of giving each other pauses and letting the other one be heard a bit more.
The second one comes in not at the beginning. The one starts and then it comes in, and then they
harmonizes on that one piece. But then, I don't know, they're kind of talking over each other, which is maybe the point of the song. The final track closer, which I never think of this as the album closer, is War for the Dark. I mean, obviously it's a Hallmark song for Pete. He's just churning them out. Also crazy that, it's like you can feel the Ivies in him, and he's just writing songs like this at this prolific rate. I don't know. I never thought of it as an album closer. Because I guess maybe where they did it in their live set was kind of like the acoustic in the middle. Feels more like a break in the middle of the album rather than like a big finale. But I can tell with this, all the production and everything. Also, they were trying to make it that big finale, I think, by adding all the strings and fading it out, because there weren't any fade outs on the album except Without You. And
the biggest production on the album in the fade out, I believe.
Compared to Without You, which is literally feels like a loop, I do like that War for the Dark, in that fade out, they start playing with the chord a little bit and introducing some other rhythms and stuff, which makes it a little more interesting.
It's a tour de force. It's what was going to be coming in the future a little more with Name of the Game and whatever. People could still ask themselves what he meant. What is War for the Dark? What is Name of the Game? I don't know. But it's an epic song in that line. The production, it's a big number with beautiful acoustic playing. Sometimes the melody and the chords remind me almost of an earlier Glenn Yarborough type something, but it's original and it's unique, and he pulled it off. They pulled it off live as well.
This feels overproduced for sure, and I actually wonder what Pete Ham thought of it, hearing kind of that big fade out and all the brass, and if that was something that he had in mind with this song, and if so, did he have it in mind, all these acoustic demos and everything he wrote that are heavily acoustic songs? Did he have these big arrangements in mind, or was this just kind of slapped onto it and, okay, that's fine, that's what you do on an Apple record, I guess, in 1970. Like, I love Wish You Were Here production. I think there's a real clear arrangement happening. Here, again, it just feels like it's the synth pad version of an orchestra. You have like, and weird Hans Zimmer level like movie scoring almost to the way that some of this happens, and like these shrieking crescendos or like different like Alfred Hitchcock kind of stuff. I think it takes away from maybe what's at its core like a pretty sentimental acoustic song. So.
Well, I like it. You have a point. You didn't think at the time it was the Philharmonic coming in or anything.
All right, so that's the album. 40 minutes of Badfinger's No Dice. Seems like there was a wealth of material that wasn't included. I don't know, 40 minutes for 1970 sounds short. This is the same year Apple's releasing a triple album with All Things Must Pass. So seems like you could spare a couple more songs on there, but maybe, they were trying to get some tighter kind of introduction for...
And I guess you could say, and it would be fair to say, that although the No Dice album garnered really good reviews at the time, and a nice breakthrough for the newly christened Badfinger, and it's a tougher sound, and they seem to be gaining respect, and yet you always dealt with the ignorance of the rock critic mainstream, or the critical view of them as maybe because of Come and Get It breakthrough, that some type of Beatle bubblegum imitation, nonsensical thing of like a group like that. And anybody that saw them live would immediately know that that's meaningless. It doesn't even apply to them. They were a great, maybe the greatest. For me, was the greatest band.
I think these songs do blend together pretty well. Obviously, you can hear the difference in their voices and everything, but I think that's a pretty good and accessible introduction to them, and they would take it to a place. And the reason I want to start this is I do think of No Dice, Straight Up, and Ass as like a trilogy. There's kind of an arc of the way that the writing progresses in these three albums and the way that you see the different perspectives of the band members. So I thought this would be a good one to kick off with. That's No Dice by Badfinger, released late 1970. Let us know what you think of the album.